Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. Tonight's class is, of course, dedicated to all the Jewish people, wherever they may be, especially in the land of Israel, especially those on the front line, especially those who need healing and those who need to be rescued. And we wish everybody in the land of Israel only good news. Okay, let's get started. We're going to first of all, next week there is no class. It's the holiday of Shavuos. Make sure to hear the 10 Commandments on Wednesday. For those who have to say Yizkor is on Thursday. So let us know if you would like to join for Shavuos or wherever you are. Make sure to go hear the 10 Commandments in the synagogue on Wednesday. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to continue with our study of Pirkei Avos, our study of the ethics of our fathers. This is chapter 3 or 4. I lost track. I think it's 4, Mishnah 19, Mishnah Yotes. And he says as follows: Shmuel hakatan omer, Shmuel the small one would say, Ben pa'olevecha al tismach, when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. V'kashlei al yagalibecha, and when he stumbles, let your heart not be gladdened. Pen yira Hashem v'ra be'einav, perhaps God will see, and it will be displeasing in his eyes. And he will turn his wrath from him to you. So Shmuel says that Shmuel, the small one, used to say this. This was one of his sayings, that when your enemies falls, do not rejoice. Okay, so first of all, who is Shmuel the small? It's a strange name. So the Talmud in Jerusalem tells us that he was not the Talmud in Jerusalem, I apologize, the Jerusalem Talmud. He was one of the first generation rabbis, Tanaim, rabbis of the Mishnah, who lived following the destruction of the temple in Yavne. For those who know the story, Yavne was spared by the Romans, and the Jewish people were able to study Torah there following the destruction of the Second Temple. So they said, the Jerusalem Talmud says, why was he called small? Because he would make himself small. And the Talmud records a few stories about him in relation to this. So the first one was Rabbi Gamliel, who was the head of the Sanhedrin, and invited 7 rabbis to join him to decide whether they was going to establish the coming year as a leap year. Okay, meaning to add a month before Passover, as we had this year. So before, we had the time of a set calendar, which we've had for a long time now. In the times of the temple, or even the post-temple era, there was this idea that they would decide whether or not to make a leap year based on the seasons, because Passover has to be in the spring. So if it was not the spring yet, they would make a decision whether they would do it. Now it's all set. It's every 2 or 3 years, and it's a 19-year cycle, and it's pretty simple. But back then, they had to decide. So Rabbi Gamliel was the head of the Sanhedrin, invited 7 rabbis to discuss this with him, whether they were going to add a month. And they show up in the morning, and there are 8 people there. Right? So he invites 7 and 8 show up. So he says, whoever came up and came here without permission must leave. That's what Rabbi Gamliel says. This is quoted in the Talmud Sanhedrin. And Shmuel, Hakatan, Shmuel, the small one, he says, I came without permission. And he said, listen, I didn't come to really be part of the discussion. I want to be present. I want to see and be a fly on the wall. And I want to see how this, I want to learn the laws of how to deal with this. Rabbi Gamliel says, hey, come back. It'll be worthy for all of the years to be declared leap years by you. In other words, Shmuel Hakatan was actually invited, but he didn't want to embarrass anyone who wasn't invited. So he said, no, it was me, and I just want to be a fly on the wall. And he said, no, it wasn't you. So we see that he took the blame for himself. He took it on himself to avoid embarrassing another person. In other words, making himself small. That's where he got the name from. In fact, this conduct actually trickled down. Once Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, which, by the way, just a plug for our Tuesday class, if you would like to learn about these important figures and understand who we're talking about on our Tuesday class, the first one we did, you can look it up on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube in the playlist, however it works. You can look up, we did Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, and he said he once smelled garlic during his teaching, and it was distracting him. So he says, whoever had garlic, please leave. Rabbi Chia stood up and left, and then everyone followed him out. Now the next, right, because Rabbi Chia was a great rabbi in his own right. They said, Rabbi Chia is leaving, everyone left. So the next morning, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he said to Rabbi Chia, was it you who came and disturbed my father and came to study after eating garlic? And he said, no, I would never do that. I would never, eat garlic and come to the study hall and distract your father, who was the leader of the Jewish people. But I accepted the blame because I did not want to embarrass anyone else. And where did he learn this from? Rabbi Chia says, I learned this from Rabbi Meir. Because once Rabbi Meir had a story, a very fascinating story, that once a woman came and said, one of your students married me. And they didn't want to embarrass the students. Rabbi Meir wrote her a divorce. And all the rabbis got up and wrote this woman a divorce. So by default, whoever the rabbi was who had married this woman in an inappropriate way would therefore be... she would for sure be divorced, and she would be able to remarry. And it says, where did Rabbi Meir learn this from? Rabbi Meir learned this from Shmuel HaKatan, Shmuel the small one. So we see here that that Shmuel HaKatan, this idea of putting the blame on someone else, trickled down. The Rabbi Meir did the same thing, and eventually Rabbi Chia did the same thing. All learning from Shmuel HaKatan, making themselves small, and not to embarrass someone else, they're willing to basically take the hit. Now we continue to have a few more stories about Shmuel HaKatan. Another story is that the Jerusalem Talmud says that 2 times a divine voice, like a divine echo, was heard about Shmuel HaKatan. The first one was, it's brought in the Talmud, page 48b, that the sages were once reclining in the upper story of a house of Guria in Jericho. Okay, this was Beis Gadia Berichai, this house in Jericho, and it says, and a divine voice said, "There is one person here among you for whom it is fitting that the divine presence should rest upon him as a prophet," meaning, in other words, that this person is worthy of having prophecy, but his generation is not fit for it. They do not deserve to have a prophet among them. The sages present directed their gaze to Hillel the elder. When he died, they eulogized him in the following manner: alas, pious one, alas, humble one, student of Ezra. So this was about Hillel. And then on another occasion, several generations later, the sages were reclining in a house in Yavne, and a divine voice from heaven said, "There is one person who is fitting upon you. The divine presence should rest upon him, but his generation is not fit for him." The sages present directed their gaze towards Shmuel the small. And when he died, they eulogized him in the following manner: alas, humble one, alas, pious one, student of Hillel. So we see that similarly, that Hillel was told by this divine voice that he was worthy of prophecy. So he was eulogized as a student of Ezra, the last of the prophets. So Shmuel HaKatan, when he passed away, since he had a similar story that his divine presence was worthy of resting on him, he was eulogized as a student of Hillel. So we see how great Shmuel was. Shmuel HaKatan was, and so now let's get into his statement. So what does he say? He says, "Ben pole v'chal tismach." When your enemy falls, do not rejoice. However, the question is, why? First of all, we know that this is something that's brought in Proverbs. In Mishlei, this is a verse from Mishlei. He's quoting a verse. So why would a verse from Mishlei be quoted in Pirkei Avos? We discussed this previously, that Pirkei Avos are supposed to be high ethics, high morals, above or beyond the letter of the law, or even deeper than the law, if you want. We translated it in one of our previous classes. So first of all, it seems like, why would it be quoted here? Seemingly, this is something that everyone should do, right? If your enemy is falling, don't rejoice. Number two is that we know that we already had this similar idea also when the Jewish people were singing the Jewish people were singing the song after the splitting of the sea, and God, there's a teaching in the Talmud that says the angels wanted to sing, and the angel said, "The works of my hands are drowning in the sea, and you wish to sing." Right. So in other words, we see that the angels weren't allowed to sing, but the Jewish people did sing. So what's going on here? Are we supposed to sing? Are we supposed to celebrate or not supposed to celebrate? So it seems maybe it's a little bit different. Because the Jewish people were celebrating, they weren't celebrating the downfall, but they were celebrating the miracle. On another example, we have we have on Purim, right? We till today, Haman is considered vile, and we boo him and we celebrate his downfall, and we say, "Cursed is Haman." So what do you mean? So first of all, it seems like it's pretty straightforward. It's something that's brought in Proverbs. It seems like it's not something that you should do. It's not super, above the letter of the law. It seems like it is the letter of the law. And number two, it seems like every time we have a downfall, we do rejoice. Okay, maybe if you're an angel, you shouldn't. But we do rejoice every time that there's a downfall of our enemies. We rejoice on Purim, we rejoice on Pesach, etc. So, in other words, there must be that Shmuel, the Shmuel HaKatan was somebody who was looking at it a little bit differently. That he's saying that maybe that's the letter of the law is something more towards the fact of how we rejoice on Purim or Pesach, but maybe beyond the letter of the law, is it somebody that do we take it personally? Are we saying that we hate this person or we hate what he stands for? We don't like the actions that they're doing. So let's get into it. So the commentators all ask this question, right? Why would Shmuel HaKatan quote this, something that's from Proverbs? So one of the classic commentators on the Mishnah, Rabbi Ovadia of Bar Tanura, he says that this was something that Shmuel HaKatan was very known to say, right? That he would say, it's something that he was common to say. He would quote this verse from Proverbs. So the Mishnah brings it as something that one of his quotable quotes, right? But how would we say that, Mishnahs are not exactly quotable quotes? There has to be some sort of lesson. So another question we could ask is connected to the next Mishnah. We know that the Mishnahs are all connected, that there's always a flow in the Pirkei Avos, where they'll be, okay, now we've discussed, this thing, we're going to now, what naturally follows, we'll discuss the next thing. Now, the next teaching is Mishnah 20, okay, as follows. Elisha ben Avuya, Elisha, the son of Avuya, said, someone who learns Torah in his childhood, what is it compared to? To ink written on fresh paper. One who learns Torah in his old age, what is it comparable? To ink inscribed on old paper. So basically he's saying that if you study when you're young, you have a tremendous opportunity, and the ink, adheres correctly to the paper, versus if you study when you're old, it's kind of too late, right? That it's not going to stay the same way. And another teaching in Mishnah 20, Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, Kfar Habavli, would say, somebody who learns from the young people. What is that compared to? Someone who eats unripe grapes and drinks wine from the press, which in English we call grape juice, right? You eat unripe grapes and you drink grape juice. In other words, you haven't let it ferment and become a good choice item. When one learns Torah from the old, what is it compared to when it eats ripened grapes and drinks aged wine? So Rabbi Yossi is saying not only you shouldn't study Torah when you're old, but however you should study from older people. Rabbi Meir said, no. Don't look at the vessel, look at what it contains. There are new vessels that are filled with old wine, and there are old vessels that do not contain any wine. So Rabbi Meir was saying, don't judge a book by its cover, or in his analogy, don't judge a jug by its age. You never know what's inside the jug. Okay, So the question is, what does this have to do with Shmuel HaKatan's teaching? Right? Shmuel HaKatan says, when your enemy is around, don't rejoice. Okay, so the Rabbi Shmuel HaKatan sorry, not Rabbi Shmuel HaKatan, the Machzor Vitri. Machzor Vitri was a commentary written in France in the 13th century, maybe 12th century, around then, as follows. He explains the verse in Proverbs a little bit differently. That Shmuel HaKatan is adding that the same thing applies not just in a conflict of worldly matters, but it also applies to a conflict of Torah matters, and that when one prevails over their colleague in a Torah discussion, so they have a debate about what the law is, that you shouldn't rejoice over the fact that your fellow has been defeated, even though the law has been decided like your opinion. This is also expressed in the prayer of Rabbi Nechonye ben Hakana. Rabbi Nechonye ben Hakana used to have a prayer that he would say when he would come into the study hall and when he would leave the study hall. So they once saw him saying a prayer when he was leaving, when he was coming in, and they asked him, "Why are you praying?" Usually when people walk into a place, they pray when it's a dangerous place, right? So if somebody walks into a building that's not secure, that's not well structured, you would say a prayer before you left, asking God to save you. And when you leave, you would thank God for having saved you. But why would you pray before you enter and after you enter a study hall? It seems like a pretty safe place. It seems like a pretty good place. So he said, when I pray and when I come in, I pray that I should not make any mistakes. And when I leave, I thank God for having given the opportunity to study Torah. And they actually quote his prayer in the Talmud. When he would have come in, he would say, "May it be your will, Lord, my God, that no mishap in determining the law is caused by me, and that I do not fail in any matter of law, and that my colleagues, who together with me engage in clarifying the law, will rejoice in me. And that I will neither declare pure that which is impure, nor declare impure that which is pure, and that my colleagues will not fail in any matter of law, and I will rejoice in them." So, and when he exited, what did he say? He says, "I give thanks before you, Lord, my God, that you have placed my lot among those who sit in the study hall, and you have not given my portion among those who sit idly on street corners." Okay, and it goes on. And this part of this prayer is said when a person finishes a tractate of Talmud or a entire set of Mishnayos, entire Seder of Mishnayos, order of the Mishnah. A person says, when makes a siyum, make a completion of one of these tractates, they recite part of the things that is recited is this prayer. So what do we see here? That he's saying that I should rejoice. They should rejoice with me if the law is decided like me, and I should rejoice in them when the law is decided like them. So we see that Shmuel HaKatan is talking about somebody who is their colleague in Torah study. That it's not somebody who isn't just discussing worldly disputes. So in other words, if a person, even though a person may really get very worked up and very passionate about their opinion about something that's really important, on the one hand, right? He said, "I don't want to ever make a mistake and declare something pure or something that's impure." And if you understand the Torah to say that something is pure, something is impure, something is forbidden, and something is permitted, you could get very passionate and you could become their enemy. In fact, King David compares it in Psalm 127. He compares it to arrows. And the Talmud says that this is comparing somebody who fills their quiver. It says in the Psalms, "Praiseworthy the man who has filled his quiver with them. They will not be ashamed when they talk to the enemies of the gates." And this is referring to arrows of Talmud. Right, so a person can become an enemy. They could become enemies in their Torah study, right? Conflicting opinions. Now, the Talmud says, however, it says in Numbers, in the book of Numbers, it says, "Therefore, it said in the book of wars of the Lord, Vahev in Sufa," that was a place, "and the valleys of Arnon." So the word Vahev could also mean love. And the Talmud in Tractate Kiddushin says that when it says Vahev Besufa, which was this place, they would translate as love in the end. That everybody, even though there's this book of wars, in the end, we all love each other. That when we come out, it's not personal. So this this is something that we see is really important. Rabbi Shmuel HaKatan is teaching us that when you become engaged in conflict about Torah study, it should never be personal. Even though you may be really passionate about your opinion and understand something theologically or halachically in a certain way, you have to always never make it personal. And then when the law is decided, even not like you have to rejoice. And in fact, the students of Rabbi Akiva, which we celebrate that we celebrate them on Lag BaOmer, the fact that they stopped passing away, it says in the Talmud the reason they passed away was because of this exact thing, that they did not respect each other, because they became so involved in their Torah study, and they became so passionate about their opinions that they couldn't respect the other person, even though their teacher Rabbi Akiva was the one who said that loving your fellow is the most important thing. This is Zeklal Gadol b'Torah. This is something that is a general principle of the Torah, is loving your fellow as yourself. But his students got so caught up in their teacher's understanding, and they ended up making it very personal, and therefore they all passed away over 32 days in this time of year in the Sfiras HaOmer. So now back to this idea when it says when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. Rabbi Shmuel HaKatan is saying, don't rejoice the fact of your enemy fell. Rejoice in the fact that you were saved. And that is why on Purim and on Pesach, we rejoice in the fact that our enemies were destroyed, not because we're worried about them. We're worried about us, and we're rejoicing in the fact that the Jewish people were saved. And therefore, when the angels went to the saying, God said, no, because you're not doing it about you. You weren't saved. Therefore, you should not rejoice when my creations, the Egyptians, were drowning. And the same thing applies when the end of that verse in Mishnah that is quoted by Rabbi Shmuel HaKatan, that says, lest God see it, and he will be displeasing with you, and he will turn his wrath from him to you. So it could be that the other person was punished, right? The person might be like, well, listen, this person was punished. The fact that the Torah law was not decided like him, that what greater punishment is that? So the Mishnah says, don't rejoice in that. Don't say, wow, that maybe so it says pen, like, lest this person God has turned his wrath against him. So the Mishnah is saying, don't view the person like this. You think that the person, that God is angry at him and punishing him. Maybe he's just having a bad day. Maybe he made a mistake in his understanding. He didn't eat a good breakfast, or he was miseducated. You never know. So not only that, you have to judge the person favorably. And number one is, don't view them as being punished by God. And in fact, otherwise, then God will punish you for viewing a person like that and judging them for the fact that the Torah wasn't decided like them. And we'll conclude with a very interesting last little bit of story about Shmuel HaKatan. There's in the Shemona Esrei, in the 18 blessings that we say in the Amidah, the silent prayer that we say every day, 3 times a day, there are 18 blessings. However, there's actually, if you count, there's actually 19. It's called the Shemona Esrei, the 18 blessings. However, there's 19. Why is there 19? There was a point in Jewish history where there were many heretics who were trying to infiltrate the Jewish people, and they needed a way so they instituted to say a blessing that would kind of out them. And the blessing was that to the heretics, or to the informers, don't give any hope, right? That is the blessing. It's in the middle of the prayers. And the idea was that, first of all, we would pray to God to rid us of these evil people. But not only that, they would, if a heretic were to be praying and they would skip this blessing, we knew that they were indeed a heretic. So they would throw them out of the synagogue. So in this time, again, this is about the years, in the first century, essentially, around that time, maybe a little bit later, 2nd century max, when they instituted this blessing, they needed someone to write it. Who's going to write this blessing? And in fact, they decided that Rabbi Shmuel HaKatan was going to be the one who was going to write the blessing. And it's called V'la Malshinim, and we say it to this day. And the reason that they say this blessing is that the reason why Shmuel HaKatan was the perfect person to write the blessing is because he never took it personally. He never saw these person as bad. He saw their actions as incorrect. But he wanted that person, in fact, to repent and to do the right thing. So it's a very important lesson about never taking things personally. Yes, we rejoice when we are saved, but we should never put someone else down or judge them or view them in a negative light. Wishing everybody a good Shabbos. We will not see you next week. We'll see you in 2 weeks, God willing. All the best.